miss you all terribly. If you take a look at my classroom, our classroom, it's so empty, and I really don't like it. So just know that Miss Prewitt is loving you and missing you. But I know that we just got done reading that book about Ben Franklin, that all together, and I had another book planned. It's on Mr. Paul Revere. So I thought maybe each day I could read a chapter to you, maybe two, and by the end of it you'll be able to take an AR test on it. I may also do some picture books. Mainly I just really want to stay connected with you. Again, I really miss you. It's kind of boring sitting here all day by myself. So, but before I begin, because I know you all have been driving me nuts about this, our little table competitions. So I'll let you know which table's which. Oh, if I remember. Holy moly. Table 1 is the table that sits closest to the computers and the door. I think Dorian and Chloe and Harrison and Hayden, maybe. You are table 1. The next table is Damaris. Table 2 is Damaris, Easton, maybe Kinsey, and Chaslin. Y'all haven't been in these seats long, so I'm kind of a little disoriented. Maybe this would be better. Alright, so table 1 is right there. The first table in the front. Table 2 is the second table in the front. And then we go back by the circle table. That's table 3. Table 4 is back in the middle. And table 5 is over here by the bookshelf. So, as of right now, table 1 is in the lead with 6 points. Tables 3 and 5 are tied with 5 points. And tables 2 and 4 are tied with 4 points. So I can't wait to get back and finish that competition. But before I go any further, let's start reading this book. Let's ride Paul Revere. I'll read the introduction. Remember with the last one, the introduction asked some really kind of like what in the world questions. And but we're going to answer them. Okay, so bear with me through the introduction. Paul Revere is famous for his ride on the night of April 18th, 1775. That night, Paul Revere galloped across the Massachusetts countryside to warn American patriots that British soldiers were coming. The soldiers hoped to capture American cannons, guns, and gunpowder in Concord. Paul also warned John Hancock and Sam Adams. These two patriot leaders were in Lexington, Massachusetts. Paul told them that the British would be coming to arrest them. In 1861, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow published his popular poem, Paul Revere's Ride. Paul Revere became an American hero. His poem begins with these lines. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride with Paul Revere. Longfellow's poem made Paul Revere famous. Do you know that there were towns in Massachusetts, Missouri, and Minnesota named Revere? As a silversmith, Paul Revere made spoons, bowls, teapots, and ladles. Do you know Paul Revere also made bells and cannons? Paul Revere enjoyed Boston's many church bells. Do you know Paul was a bell ringer when he was a teenager? Paul Revere warned American patriots that the British were coming. Do you know other writers rode that same night giving the same warning? The answer to these questions and many more lie in who Paul Revere was as a boy and a young man. This book is about Paul Revere before he made history. Alright, you ready for chapter 1? Chapter 1, Paul Revere is born. And you know what's kind of standing out to me, guys? I mean, we've talked about chapter titles, we've talked about dates and sequent words. So I want you guys to see if you can pay attention and see if you can answer the question, is this chapter written in time order or is it written in sequence? Tuesday, December 24th. Y'all know I like to go blah, 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 because I mess up. Tuesday, December 21st, 1734, was a cold day in Boston, Massachusetts Bay Colony. But inside the Revere house, it was warm. Deborah Revere held their son as Master Paul Revere proudly smiled. The new baby was named after his father, Paul. The Revere's first child, Deborah, had been born 2 years earlier in 1732. She was named after her mother. Could you imagine two Maggie Prewitts running around? Nope. Mr. Mad either. Paul Revere was gently carried to Cockrell Church. Friends and family joined Paul's father as Reverend Wellstead baptized Paul. Paul's mother was home resting. Before long, Paul was back in her arms. Friends crowded into the Revere home to celebrate Paul's death. Not his death. Y'all, I'm crazy. Paul's birth. Paul's father was a silversmith. He made silver spoons, buckles, teapots, dishes, cups, and bowls. He had his own silver shop in Boston. Paul's father proudly stamped P. Revere on his silver. Paul's mother was named Deborah Hitchborn Revere. Her father owned Hitchborn's Wharf. Hitchborn's Wharf.
Miss Gray, please call the office at extension 4000.
See, I'm still working. We're still getting pages. Let me try that again. Her father owned Hitchborn's Wharf. Hitchborn's Wharf stretched into Boston Bay. It wasn't the longest wharf in Boston, but it was the busiest. It was one of the busiest. Boston was the busiest seaport in the 13 colonies. Hundreds of ships, mostly British, sailed to Boston every year. The ships brought books, paper, glass, tea, pottery, china, silk, lace, molasses, tools, and spices. The ships left loaded with lumber and fish. Hustling, bustling Boston was almost surrounded by water. This helped Boston become a valuable seaport, but it meant Boston's 15,000 people were crowded into a small space. That wouldn't be good today, would it? Boston Neck, a narrow strip of the land, connected Boston to the mainland. A gate at Boston Neck guarded the entrance into the city by land. When the tide was especially high, Boston Neck was covered with water and Boston became an island. Boston was a town of bells. Chiming church bells called people to worship. Clanging bells warned of fires. Schoolmasters shook handheld bells. I'm gonna get me one of those, okay? Y'all ready? Ding, 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 ding. Bells tolled when someone died. Pealing bells announced the opening of the markets. Cowbells jingled. Peddlers' bells jangled. Boston was a lively, noisy town in 1734 when Paul Revere was born. Carriages and wagons rolled along crooked cobblestone streets like Love Lane, Fish Street, and Ship Street. Merchants and shopkeepers had colorful signs swinging outside their shops. Farmers sold meat, fruit, and vegetables in markets. Fishermen, tooting tin whistles, peddled fresh cod, salmon, and mackerel. Boys shouting, "Lobs! Lobs! Lobs!" sold live lobsters. Sailors and sea captains strolled the streets. Apprentices ran errands. Students played on their way to school. Hungry pigs wandered the streets. Cows grazed on Boston Common, a public field. Here's a picture. I know you guys like looking at the picture, so if you want to look at that while I'm finishing reading. Dogs chased cats. Cats chased rats and mice. Seagulls soared. Blacksmiths forged horseshoes, tools, and wheels. Carpenters hammered wood. Candlemakers molded candles and shaped soap. Hey, I think Mr. Franklin's dad did that, right? Remember Mr. Ben Franklin? Wasn't he a candle maker or soap maker? Shipwrights built ships. Sailmakers sewed sails. Rope makers twisted miles of rope. Silversmiths like Paul's father fashioned silver spoons, teapots, sugar bowls, buttons, buckles, and dishes. Boston was Paul's world. Paul loved Boston so much that one day he would risk his own life for the town. Alright, so that's chapter 1. Since I read the introduction today, I'm not going to read another chapter. Again, you don't have to listen to this. I just thought you guys might like to kind of stay connected, and I feel like that if we all read a book together, it would be a way we can stay connected. So anyways, I hope you all have a great night. I hope that you all are doing well. If you haven't logged on yet, make sure to log on MobyMax. I sent you a message, so you have to go through like 2 little buttons to get to Messenger. make sure you reply back. I really like hearing from you. I think I've heard from 4 or 5 of you so far today, and it really makes my heart happy. You all know I love hearing from you. So stay safe, stay well, message me. Grown-ups, if you guys need something, please don't hesitate to holler, and hopefully I'll check in with you all tomorrow.